I need to tell you something before I start. When I finally pulled up the old security footage from that gas station, the footage from 10 years before I ever worked there, I sat in front of that screen for a very long time. Not because of what I saw, but because of what was already there. Standing in the exact same spot at the exact same time. Drei Uhr nachts. Every single night. For as far back as the recordings went. Whatever came into that gas station every night while I worked there had been coming there long before I arrived. And it will keep coming long after I am gone. My name is Cole Dawson. I was 22 years old. And this is what happened to me during the worst 4 weeks of my life. At a gas station on Route 90, in the middle of nowhere, West Texas. I took the night shift job out of desperation. I was a sophomore at UT Austin, studying civil engineering. Tuition had gone up that semester, and my financial aid had been cut. I needed money fast, and I needed it without interrupting my classes during the day. Night shift at a gas station seemed perfect, quiet, simple, mostly just sitting behind a counter reading textbooks while the occasional trucker came in for coffee. The station was called Ryder Stop. It sat alone on Route 90, about 40 miles east of the town of Marfa. If you know West Texas, you know what that means. Flat land in every direction. No trees. No hills. Just highway and darkness and the kind of silence that makes you feel very small and very alone. The nearest house was almost 8 miles away. My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. 8 hours, 5 nights a week. The previous night shift worker, a guy named Brett, was leaving for another job. He trained me for exactly 2 nights before disappearing from my life entirely. There was one thing Brett said on his very last night that I didn't take seriously at the time. He was counting the register, getting ready to leave, and he said it almost casually, almost like an afterthought. "Hey," he said, "around 3 a.m., sometimes you'll get a customer. Kind of strange looking. Just don't make too much eye contact, yeah?" I laughed. I thought he was joking. He wasn't laughing. He just picked up his jacket, said good luck, and walked out the door. And that was the last time I ever saw Brett. The first 2 weeks were completely uneventful. Long, quiet, slightly boring nights. A trucker every few hours. Occasionally a family in a minivan pulling off the highway. I sat behind the counter, drank terrible coffee, studied my textbooks, and watched the flat Texas darkness through the big front windows. It was actually peaceful. I started to think this might be the easiest money I had ever made. And then the third week started. It was a Tuesday night, or technically Wednesday morning. I remember checking my phone and seeing 2:58 a.m. I was halfway through a chapter on load-bearing calculations, and the station was completely empty. No cars outside. No sound except the hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant whisper of wind across the flat land outside. At exactly 3 a.m., the door opened. I looked up from my textbook and immediately felt something wrong. Not a thought, not a logical conclusion. Something older than thought. Something in my body, my spine, my stomach, that simply said, "This is not right." The figure that walked in was dressed in a long, dark coat. Jeans, work boots. From a distance, it looked completely like a man. Average height, average build. Nothing obviously unusual. But as it moved toward the counter, something started to feel increasingly, deeply, fundamentally wrong, in a way I still struggle to put into words. The movement was wrong, not dramatically wrong, not the way you'd notice immediately, subtly wrong, like watching a video of a person walking that has been slowed down by just a fraction of a percent. Each step landing just a half second after you expected it to. The weight distribution slightly off. The head not moving quite the way a head moves when a person walks. It stopped at the far end of the snack aisle, about 15 feet from the counter, and stood there. I said, "Evening, can I help you find something?" It turned toward me, and I understood immediately and completely why Brett had said, Don't make too much eye contact. The face was wrong. I cannot tell you specifically how. Every individual feature, taken separately, was within the range of normal human appearance. Eyes, nose, mouth, all present, all approximately the correct size and position. But together, as a face, as a complete human face, something was deeply, fundamentally wrong, like a photograph of a face that had been reconstructed by someone who had only ever read a description of what a human face looked like, but had never actually seen one. It looked at me. For almost 30 seconds, it simply looked at me. And then it turned, walked back toward the door, and left. No purchase, no words, nothing. I sat behind that counter, completely still, for almost 10 minutes after it left. My textbook open in front of me, my coffee getting cold, telling myself it was just an unusual-looking person, that West Texas attracted strange characters, that there was nothing to worry about. I checked the parking lot camera on the monitor behind the counter. The lot had been completely empty before that figure walked in. I scrolled back through the footage to see what car it had arrived in. There was no car. It had simply walked out of the darkness of Route 90 into my gas station and walked back into the darkness again. It came back the next night, 3 a.m. Exactly. The door opened. The same figure, same coat, same wrong movement, same wrong face. This time it walked all the way to the counter. It stood on the other side of the register, less than 3 feet away from me, and I sat there completely frozen, my hands flat on the counter, forcing myself to maintain what I hoped was a normal expression. Up close, the wrongness was overwhelming. I could see its hands resting on the edge of the counter. They looked like hands, 5 fingers, knuckles, fingernails, but the proportions were slightly off. The fingers just a fraction too long. The knuckles just a fraction too large. It did not speak. It did not ask for anything. It simply stood there looking at me with that assembled face for what felt like an extremely long time. And then it said something. One sentence. In a voice that sounded like a voice the way its face looked like a face. Recognizable as speech. Recognizable as language. But something about the tone, the rhythm, the resonance was wrong in a way that made my ears feel strange. It said, "You are here every night." Not a question, a statement, delivered flatly, without inflection, without any of the social warmth that normally colors casual human observation. I said, "Yes, night shift." It nodded once, slowly, and left. I called the non-emergency police line that morning. After my shift, I didn't know what to tell them exactly. I described the figure as best I could. The officer on the phone was polite, but clearly skeptical. He said they'd keep an eye on the area. Nothing ever came of it. I thought about quitting. I genuinely considered it, but I needed the money, and some stubborn part of me refused to be driven away from a job by something I couldn't even properly explain. So I stayed. It came back every single night, always at exactly 3 a.m., always the same coat, always the same wrong movement, always the same wrong face. Sometimes it stayed for 30 seconds, sometimes for almost 10 minutes, always standing, always watching, never purchasing anything, never speaking again after that first night. By the end of the 3rd week, I had developed a routine. When it came in, I would look slightly to the left of its face rather than directly at it. I would keep my hands visible on the counter. I would breathe slowly and steadily, and I would wait for it to leave. It was the most frightening routine I have ever maintained. The last night it came was a Friday. It was the end of my 4th week. I've been offered a different job, daytime work at a campus library, and I had accepted. This was my final night shift at Ryder Stop. 3 a.m. The door opened. But something was different this time. It walked in, same coat, same movement, but instead of stopping at the counter, it walked past me, behind the counter, into the small back room where the safe and the cleaning supplies were kept. I stood up from my stool. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, but I didn't run. I don't know why. I stood there at the counter, staring at the door to the back room, which had swung almost completely closed behind it. For almost 4 minutes, nothing happened. No sound from the back room. No movement. Nothing. And then it came back out. It walked past me again, back to the front of the store, and stopped at the door, and turned around one final time, and looked at me with that assembled, reconstructed, deeply wrong face. And it said, "You are leaving." Again, not a question, a statement. "Yes," I said, my voice completely steady. "I have no idea how. Last night." It nodded. Once, that same slow, deliberate nod, and walked out into the Texas darkness for the last time. I checked the back room immediately. Nothing was disturbed. Nothing was missing. The safe was untouched. I have no idea what it was doing back there. I have never had an explanation for that. And the absence of explanation is somehow the most frightening part of the whole experience. I didn't look up the old security footage until 6 months later. I had tried to put the whole experience behind me. New job, new routine, thesis work, keeping me busy. I had almost succeeded, but something kept pulling at me. That thing Brett had said. It had not aged, not changed, not varied in any detail whatsoever. Whatever it was not getting older. And if it had been coming to that gas station for at least 4 years before I arrived, then how long had it actually been coming? I called Gary Ryder back. I asked him if there were older recordings, tapes, maybe from before the digital system was installed. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said something that I have thought about every single day since. He said, "Son, that gas station has been in my family since 1987, and as long as I can remember, there have always been stories about the night shift." I finished my degree. I graduated. I have a good job now, a normal life, an apartment in Austin with good locks and bright lights. I don't drive through West Texas anymore. I take the long way. Whenever I need to go anywhere in that direction, I don't stop at gas stations alone at night, anywhere if I can avoid it. And I never, ever work the night shift. The footage is still on that hard drive, in a drawer in my apartment. I have watched it exactly once since that Saturday afternoon. I will never watch it again. Sometimes late at night, when the apartment is quiet and the city outside has settled into its 3 a.m. silence, I think about that figure, in that coat, walking out of the Texas darkness into that fluorescent light, standing in that aisle, looking at me with that face. And I think about what Gary Ryder said. Since 1987, there have always been stories about the night shift. That gas station opened in 1987. That is 38 years ago, 38 years of night shift workers, sitting alone behind that counter, at 3 a.m., on Route 90, in the West Texas darkness. And I wonder how many of them saw what I saw, and I wonder how many of them made the mistake of looking directly at the face. And I wonder if whatever walks out of that darkness every night at 3 a.m. ever found one of them more interesting than the others, and decided not to leave. If you're ever driving alone at night on a long, empty highway, and you see a gas station sitting by itself in the darkness, and it is 3 a.m., and there's a figure inside, standing very still, just drive past. Whatever you need can wait until morning. I am your host. This has been Hollow Echoes Horror. New story every single week. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss one. And remember, some places attract things that have always been there, long before you arrived, and will remain long after you leave.